Good morning, young people. Hope you had a good, restful weekend. This is Miss Cooper. Want to give you information about the week of September 14th through the 18th. Our week 3 learning plan. We're going to be working on chapter 3. I hope you completed your choice activity project that will be due today by the end of the day. You need to email that to me, whether you chose to do a PowerPoint or a timeline or a YouTube skit. Email that to me. We'll have bell ringers and exit tickets all through Google Forms. Make sure you click those links. There are Edmentum Flex assignments posted in Clever. Make sure you work at your own pace, but get those items done. I'm going to make sure I've got good volume here just in case.
Mr. Gatlin and Ms. Griffin, you're needed in the South office. Mr. Gatlin and Ms. Griffin, you're needed in the South office.
Make sure that you are going on to your Google Classroom periodically and checking for those vocab.com assignments. All it takes is for you to go over to Google Classroom and click on the link and it'll take you where you need to go. There's going to be a week 3 quiz on Friday, and then we'll cover chapters 1, 2, and 3. You'll have a summary video that'll be posted for you on Thursday. Make sure you're reading all your emails. Make sure you're checking all your attachments. Very important. We will be experimenting with Zoom this week on Wednesday in our live session. Our distance learners need to be ready to pick up packets on Monday. If you are a person that did not have a device and have not been able to log on to the platforms, please pick up a packet. We'll have independent work and review on Tuesday and Thursday, which means that there'll be less talking. I call it a non-live session, but there will be items up there for you to attend to. So please make sure every single day you check the page. Every day you check this team. You check your email so that you'll know what's happening every single day. Our objectives for this week are we're going to be analyzing the French Revolution and the reign of Napoleon Bonaparte and discussing their enduring effects on political expectations for self-government and individual liberty. Basically, we're going to be trying to figure out how did these things that happened in the past, how have they impacted us today? How have we began to think or even change our thinking as a result of what we've seen happen before? If you've seen something happen before, you should have a response to it. You should have an opinion about it, and possibly it will help you make decisions for right now. If you know that that didn't work, then you shouldn't try to do it now. But if you know that did work, then maybe it will work again. So that's what we're going with this. How do these things that have happened in the past, how do they affect us today in terms of how we think we should be led? Our leadership, rulers, okay, people who are in charge over us. How do we think we should be led, and how has it impacted our ability to understand and even articulate individual liberty? What do we think we need to be allowed to do or not allowed to do? Is it okay for the king to just start cutting people's heads off because he woke up like that? Is it okay for the taxes or the price of bread to rise 10 times overnight and you didn't raise wages? Is that okay? So things that have happened then, they're very, very likely to happen again. And the responses, they can be either the same or they can be different, or you can just kind of look and see what worked and pick and choose the best situation that applies to you today. That's what history is all about, connecting the past to the present so we can have a better future. I'm going to spend about 5 minutes reading to you. I know that you don't always like to listen to read or even like to listen to somebody read, but this whole class is built off of you being able to read this big book, okay? This is a big book, and ultimately I don't mind. I love reading, so I don't mind reading the chapters to you because ultimately you have to have the information. Okay, you can Google it. That's why you're doing PowerPoints. You can Google some of these things, but I also want you to hear from the text itself. Okay, this is a secondary source with primary sources included. There are primary documents here, quotes. There are secondary sources, peer reviewed. So this is why we go to the book and we make sure we get that information to you. So I'm going to read section 1. Chapter 3, the title of chapter 3 is The French Revolution and Napoleon, and the essential questions or big question is, what causes revolution? How does revolution change society? And remember, the word revolution pretty much just means great change. Whenever we have a revolution, it is a major shift in ideas. It's a change in the way we've done things. Revolution. Keep that word in mind. What causes that? Are people getting sick and tired of stuff and they won't change? Or is it inevitable? You can't keep doing the same thing and think it's going to work out. If it's, if it wasn't working 1,000 years ago by you enslaving people, you're still going to have people upset if you try to enslave a different group of people. So think about that. Section 1 says, the storming and destruction of the Bastille, Paris's great prison and a hated symbol of the monarchy, was one of the pivotal events of the French Revolution. An Englishman named Mr. Jenkinson, who was in Paris at the time, wrote the following eyewitness account of the event. The Bastille made some resistance, but was taken yesterday evening. The governor and sub-governor had their heads cut off, which were carried in triumph around the city. The king was at first very resolute. The thoughts, however, of the danger he was in had this evening induced him to recant all his former words and to submit in everything. Deputies had arrived this afternoon from Versailles with this good news, and it is reported that the king will be here himself tomorrow. But I own, I very much doubt it. The consternation that has prevailed in Paris for the last 2 days is beyond all power of description. Few people have gone out of their doors, and all public amusement for the first time have been stopped. I, however, have seen everything of importance from the first entrance of the troops to the taking of the Bastille, which I was present at yesterday evening, and indeed the whole sight has been such that nothing would have tempted me to miss it. This was a letter from a man named Mr. Jenkinson in Paris, dated July 15th, 1789. He was there. Okay? Today, the anniversary of the storming of the Bastille is celebrated each year as France's Independence Day holiday. The storming of the Bastille kicked off a series of events that would change France, Europe, and the wider world. Causes of the French Revolution. The French Revolution has often been seen as a major turning point in European history. The institutions of the old regime were destroyed. A new order emerged based on individual rights, representative institutions, and a concept of loyalty to the nation rather than the monarch. The long-range causes of the French Revolution are to be found in the condition of French society. Before the Revolution, French society was based on inequality. Since the Middle Ages, France's population was divided into 3 orders or estates. The first estate, or clergy, numbered about 130,000 out of a total population of 27 million and owned about 10% of the land. The clergy were radically divided. The higher clergy, cardinals, bishops, and heads of monasteries, were from noble families and shared their outlook and interests. The parish priests were often poor and from the class of commoners. Very important to understand this clergy, the first estate. Most of them were kind of well off and, well-to-do people from good families. So the clergy. The second estate, or nobility, numbered about 350,000 and owned about 25 to 30% of the land. They played a crucial role in society in the 1700s. They held leading positions in the government, the military, the law courts, and the Roman Catholic Church. Despite controlling most of the wealth, neither the clergy nor the nobles had to pay the taille, a tax, France's chief tax. So y'all are the richest people in the whole country and y'all don't have to pay taxes? Unlike the first and second estates, the third estate was divided by vast differences in occupation, level of education, and wealth. Peasants made up 75 to 80% of the third estate and owned about 35 to 40% of the land. Middle-class members of the third estate owned the rest. At least half the peasants had little or no land on which to live. Peasants owed certain duties to the nobles, which were a holdover from medieval times when serfdom was widespread. The feudal system, remember I told you to look up the feudal system? Yeah, if you were poor and someone was wealthy, you just owed them because you were poor. You don't own anything, you don't have anything, or you're just going to pay us because. That creates like a slave system, and you couldn't leave the land. If you did not Google the feudal system, I hope you go and do that before this week is over. We'll talk more about it in one of our sessions, but definitely get a good understanding of that old idea of serfdom and the feudal system. It's slavery in Europe. Totally no black people, just white people. But the concept is about oppression. So remember, when we start to talk about slavery or any other forms of oppression, try to refrain from thinking it's all about black people, because it's about everybody. It's about black people, it's about women, it's about poor people, it's about old people, it's about classes, okay? The haves and have-nots. There's a lot that goes into the idea of the oppressor, the person that feels like I'm going to control you and you better do what I say. Because see, people will revolt against that mess. You keep trying to put people down and act like you're better, people will revolt. That's where revolution comes from. People get sick and tired of stuff. Let me keep going. The first two estates did not have to pay taxes. Keep that in mind. And then the third estate, they owned most of the land. They had most of the real jobs. People who are rich because their family was rich, you didn't have to work for that. You just got it. Silver spoon. Anyhow, at least half the peasants had little or no land on which to live. Peasants owed these duties, a holdover from the medieval time when serfdom was widespread. For example, a peasant had to pay a fee to grind his or her flour or to press his or her grapes because the local lord controlled the flour mill and the wine press. When the harvest time came, the peasant had to work a certain number of days harvesting the noble's crop. Peasants fiercely resented these duties. So not only do I have to pay you to grind my stuff, I also got to grind your stuff and I got to press your grapes for your wine so you can get drunk and I have to pay for it and you don't even have to pay any tax. That'll make you mad. I done went to work hard all day. You've been up partying hardy all night and I got to come in here and do your work for you. That'll make people mad. Another part of the Third Estate consisted of urban craftspeople, shopkeepers, and workers. These people were also struggling to survive. In the 1700s, the price of consumer goods increased much faster than wages, which left these urban groups with decreased buying power. The bourgeoisie, this last thing and I'm going to stop. The bourgeoisie, or middle class, was another part of the Third Estate. This group included about 8% of the population, or more than 2 million people. They owned about 20 to 25% of the land. The bourgeoisie included merchants, bankers, industrials, as well as professional types, lawyers, holders of public offices, doctors, and writers. The middle class was unhappy with the privileges held by nobles. They did not want to abolish the nobility, however, but to better their own position. They didn't want to get rid of them. They don't want to kill them, really. They're just like, look, let's even this out some. So they didn't like the circumstances, and they had been expressing their discontent. This is what causes a revolution. When you're not happy about something, you're sick and tired of stuff. That's what happens. So they began to, so some bourgeoisie had managed to become nobles by being appointed to public offices that conferred noble status. About 6,500 new nobles had been created by appointment during the 1700s. The bourgeoisie also shared certain goals with the nobles. Both groups were increasingly upset with a monarchical system resting on privileges and on an old and rigid social order. Both were also drawn to the new political ideas of the Enlightenment. New people, new thinkers, new minds. Revolution. Increased criticism of the old order of society had been part of the 18th century Enlightenment. The philosophers did not advocate revolution. Their ideas, however, were widely spread among the literate middle class and the noble elites of France. So even though the Enlightenment thinkers didn't say, oh, you should go kill the king, they didn't say that, but they gave people things to think about in their writings. And people who were literate, that's who can read it and say, you know what, I agree with that. But there are a lot of people who are poor in older parts of the world history book. Lots of people were poor and illiterate. And even in today's society, in countries that they call third world, that's not politically correct. It's underdeveloped. But in an underdeveloped country, illiteracy is one of the major reasons. Because if you can't read and write, you can be enslaved. That people can tell you anything if you can't read and write and comprehend. People will smile at you and get you to do things and make you their slave. And you wouldn't even know. They're signing your children away and putting documents and putting laws in place, but you can't read. So illiteracy is always a problem. And when we become more literate, it can change society because now we can think about these things and make just, rational, and logical decisions. Okay? Last thing I'm going to read, and I got to close this up. So they had these new ideas of the Enlightenment, this third estate, the bourgeoisie specifically. They were increasingly criticizing the old world order. And the philosophes, they didn't advocate revolution, but their ideas were widely spread among the literate middle class and noble elites of France. When the revolution began, revolutionary leaders often quoted Enlightenment writers, especially Jean-Jacques Rousseau. The name that looks like Jean, it's pronounced Jean, that's a French name, Jacques Rousseau. I think, therefore I am. You're not going to tell me I'm a slave. You're not going to tell me I'm beneath you. If I think I'm better than this, if I think that I can do better than this, if I think I can be better than this, maybe I can be. And just maybe I will be. And then you have a revolution because you're not going to stop me. You're not going to keep putting your knee on my neck and acting like I better do this or else. Or else what? A revolution. It takes place when people get sick and tired of stuff. Okay. Social conditions and Enlightenment ideas then formed an underlying background to the French Revolution. The immediate cause of the revolution was the near collapse of the French budget. Yeah, remember Louis XIV spent all that money? Although the economy had been expanding for 50 years, there were periodic crises, bad harvests in 1787 and 1788, and a slowdown in manufacturing led to food shortages, rising prices for food, and unemployment. On the eve of the revolution, the French economy was in crisis. Despite these problems, the French king and his ministers continued to spend enormous sums of money on wars and court luxuries. The Queen Marie Antoinette was especially known for her extravagance, and this too caused popular resentment. When the government decided to spend huge sums to help the American colonists against Britain, the budget went into total crisis. With France on the verge of financial collapse, now we're at a different Louis. Let's not get these Louis confused. You had Louis XIII with Cardinal Richelieu, Louis XIV with Cardinal Mazarin. That's the one that built the Palace of Versailles, Louis XIV. We are now at Louis XVI. Okay? This is the guy that was married to Queen Antoinette who said, forget it, let him eat cake, I don't care. This is the one that got his head cut off. This guy right here, him and his wife. So back to this was the French Parliament, and it had not met since 1614. Go back to that sentence. With France on the verge of financial collapse, Louis XVI was forced to call a meeting of the Estates General, and this was the French Parliament, and it had not met since 1614. Okay, the king was doing it all. You didn't want to ask the people nothing. You wanted to do it yourself, and look how that worked out. So, by all means, that's your section, your portion of section 1. I will read some more to you throughout this week, and make sure that you get the rest of the information that you will need for your quiz on Friday. But by all means, please listen to the readings and take notes, okay? I will have things posted for you to take notes about, but every time I read or you hear me read, please make sure you're taking notes. Okay, that's it for today, young people. Peace and love until next time.